Wow, Batman, there's a lot wrong in here that needs to be addressed, so let's go through it. You say Wicca was created by Gerald Gardner, and for the most part that's true. We can say that's a factual statement. He was initiated into a pre-existing group that had not lasted that long, right? So it's certainly not ancient. But he was actually initiated into a coven as he claimed, and we can talk about that if you want in another video. I don't think you're too interested in that. And certainly, he reformed what he was introduced into the religion of Wicca that we understand today. So that's fine. I'm not going to contend to that point. You go on to say he's a Thelemite, and maybe. There's no historical indication that he was ever a Thelemite. He did receive a charter from Gardner to create a branch of the OTO, and he never pursued that. He decided to go and do his witch thing. So at some point, he might have been interested in Thelema. He might have been interested in becoming a Thelemite. You get to a certain point within the OTO and you are expected to forsake your previous religious views and experience and follow the law of Thelema exclusively. So at some point, if he had established that order, he would have become a Thelemite. I don't see any way around that. However, it's also very possible that Crowley wanted him to do that work, establishing an order there, and didn't care whether Gardner was a Thelemite or not. Gardner certainly never identified as a Thelemite or said that he followed the particular views of being a Thelemite, right? There's nothing to indicate that that was his personal spiritual praxis. You then go on to say, so women would have something and not join Thelema. But here's the thing. Thelema is a religion that is open to both men and women. It has never been exclusive to one sex. If you're talking about the OTO, that is also co-ed. That is an order that originally came out of clandestine masonry and was then co-opted by Crowley. He reformed it so that it would accept his religion of Thelema and propagate those views in a sense of spiritual community. Okay? At no point has it ever been an issue for a woman to be a Thelemite or to be involved in the OTO, and it has never been an issue with the AA either, which is another organization founded by Crowley under the banner of Thelema. So there's no point here in having something separate for women. At the same time, Gerald Gardner's coven and the coven that he was initiated into were both co-ed. Matter of fact, Gerald Gardner got involved in Wicca and witchcraft because he was part of a Rosicrucian theater, which was part of a clandestine form of Masonic Rosicrucianism that was co-ed. So I'm not seeing where the issue here is. It would not have been an issue for either Crowley or Gardner. At the same time, Wicca does not teach Thelema. Wicca does not teach any of the tenets of Thelema or the worldview of Thelema. Yes, when you say, and it harm none, do what they will, that Crowley taught, that is an earlier form of what would become the Wiccanry of, and it harm none, do what ye will. And in Thelema, they don't even say, and it harm none, right? They say, do what thou wilt is the whole of the law, love is the law, love under will. And they'll say 93. Because 93 is a geometric value for both Thelema and agape. So, will and love. You can also say agape, which is probably the better way to pronounce it instead of agape. So, I regret pronouncing it that way. Anyway, the point being, what you're saying here is factually incorrect. I don't expect you to agree with Thelema or Wicca. At the same time, I don't particularly align with Crowley's views either. I see some of his views to be very problematic. I am not a fan of Crowley. However, if you're going to be talking about somebody's religion or somebody's perspective, you need to know what that perspective is, so that you know their actual position, and then you can deconstruct it or make your arguments. If you're telling a Thelemite or a Wiccan that they practice Satanism, they're going to laugh at you, as they should, because, again, that is factually incorrect, and you're putting words in their mouth. If you can't even meet them at their thought process and deconstruct that thought process and their actual position, they're not going to take you seriously, and they shouldn't take you seriously. If you were to go around and tell Thelemites that they're Satanist, or, unless it might be Frater Oz, or to say to a Wiccan that they're Satanist, they would laugh at you, as they well should, because you don't understand the history of what you're talking about, you don't understand the culture of what you're talking about, you don't understand how what you're talking about is even organized. They would have every right to laugh at you. Not to mention the fact that Satanism didn't exist during Crowley's lifetime. If anything, Satanism was influenced by Crowley. You know, Anton LaVey took a few cues from Crowley. They were both very good showmen, and while satanic philosophy is not Crowley's philosophy, you can see some influence there. You can see how Anton LaVey was inspired in some ways by Crowley, and especially his using a naked woman as an altar, right? That comes from Crowley and the Gnostic Mass. It may be possible Crowley got that from an earlier tradition that the EGC came out of, but I feel comfortable saying that comes from Crowley at this point in time. I do want to make a citation, though, a bit of a retraction. I used the term gematria when I should have said isosophy, because we're dealing with Greek and not Hebrew. But most of you watching this video, you might not know what isosophy is unless this video is starting to hit witch talk and the ceremonial magic community. Now, Crowley's work did influence Wicca. Why is that? Well, it's because the coven that Gardner was initiated into was a remnant of something called the Order of Woodcraft Chivalry. The Order of Woodcraft Chivalry was an interesting group of Quakers and naturalists and those who were romanticists of the pre-Christian era. We're going to say this was about 1940s, right? If we're going to say Gardner's Wicca emerged in the 1950s, maybe 1940s if we're being generous, this would have happened in the 1940s. And what's interesting about it is it was part of this movement that I would say at the time, but clearly going back into the late 1800s, where there was this belief that to be a good esoteric Christian, you had to understand what it was like to be a pagan. You had to understand the philosophies and the worldviews that came before. And there's some legitimacy to that, right? When you look at how things evolved. And it was this romantic era that gave us things like the Golden Dawn, where you had an outer order that practiced a psychological model based on Egyptian god forms, and then an inner order where you had a spirit model based on Christ and the Holy Spirit. You also get Wicca out of this. Because, well, what is Wicca? Wicca is a mixture. It had a mixture of Solomonic techniques, the casting of the circle using the athame, the consecration of the creature of salt and the creature of water, mixed with naturally oriented spirituality and especially an emphasis on fertility. The cycle of the seasons, the cycle of the year, the interaction of the masculine and the feminine in a reproductive, fertile cycle. It's a mixture of Solomonic magic and those aforementioned elements. One of the members of the Order of Woodcraft Chivalry was a fan of Crowley's and a nudist, and his material did become part of that coven. And you even see Crowley's literature, his writing, in The Great Rite. Much to Valiente's dismay, she got rid of a lot of that, but the parts in The Great Rite still remained.